The giant meeting hall of the Galactic Council was full of noise and chatter. Hundreds of alien creatures sat in their special seats, talking to each other in different languages. The air was filled with the sound of translators working hard to change words from one language to another. Ambassador Robert walked slowly to the center of the room. He was a human, and he looked very small compared to the huge alien beings around him. His blue uniform was clean and pressed, but he felt nervous inside. Today was very important for his people. The room became quiet when Robert reached the speaking platform. He looked up at the massive creatures staring down at him. Some had multiple eyes, others had scales like reptiles, and some looked like giant insects. They all seemed to think humans were not important. "Great members of the council," Robert began, his voice clear and strong. "The people of Earth need your help. Our enemy has attacked our space colonies and killed many of our people." A loud sound like angry buzzing came from the insect-like aliens called the Cricksack. They were laughing at him. Robert felt his face get hot with anger, but he stayed calm. High Chancellor Voss stood up slowly. He was 12 feet tall and looked like a giant lizard walking on two legs. His green skin was covered with scars from old battles. His yellow eyes looked at Robert like he was looking at a small bug. "Little human," Voss said in a deep voice that made the floor shake. "Your people control only 17 star systems. Your enemy controls 3,000 systems. They have destroyed many races that were stronger than you. What can your weak soldiers do against such power?" The big screen behind Robert lit up with pictures and numbers. It showed maps of space where the enemy had won battles. It showed their huge ships destroying planets. It showed how fast they were taking over more and more space. Everything on the screen said that humans would lose badly. Robert looked at the screen, then back at the council members. "We do not ask to lead this war. We only ask for a chance to fight beside you and prove that we are good allies." More sounds of laughter filled the room. The crystal-like beings called Veltari made a sound like breaking glass when they laughed. The bird-like aquilans flapped their wings and made harsh crying sounds. "Your military records show some success against space pirates," said Counselor Nash, a being that looked like a walking tree with glowing fruits. "But pirates are not real soldiers. Your enemy has professional armies that have conquered 47 different races. They have been fighting for 500 years. Your soldiers have never fought a real war." This was where the council was very wrong, but they did not know it. While other alien races had lived in peace under council protection, humans had been fighting. They had been fighting each other on Earth for thousands of years. They had been fighting to survive on dangerous new planets. They had been fighting for food, water, and air on worlds that tried to kill them every day. What the aliens saw as no real war experience was actually the opposite. Humans had never stopped fighting. Every human child learned how to fight. Every human adult knew how to use weapons. Every human settlement was ready for war at any moment. "Your people seem brave," said another council member, a floating jellyfish-like creature. "But bravery is not enough. Your enemy does not just defeat their enemies. They completely destroy them. Every man, woman, and child. Every city and farm. They leave nothing behind," Robert nodded. "We understand the danger, but we also understand something that you do not." "And what is that?" asked Voss, his voice full of doubt. "You fight wars to achieve goals. When the goals become impossible, you surrender and make deals. You try to save as many lives as possible. This is smart and civilized." Robert paused and looked around the room. Every alien was listening carefully now. "Humans fight wars to win them, completely. We do not surrender. We do not make deals with enemies who want to destroy us. We fight until we win or until we are all dead." The room became very quiet. Some of the aliens looked at each other with worry in their eyes. "That is not warfare," said Voss. "That is madness." "Maybe," Robert agreed, "but it has kept humanity alive for 30,000 years on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. And now we have spaceships." The council members began talking to each other in worried voices. They had seen many young races ask for help before being destroyed. But none of those races had ever talked like this human was talking. "Even if what you say is true," said Counselor Nash, "your enemy has weapons and ships that are far better than yours. They have millions of soldiers. What can you possibly do against such numbers?" Robert smiled for the first time since entering the room. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just smelled blood. "You are asking the wrong question," he said. "The question is not what we can do to them. The question is what we are willing to do to ourselves to make sure they lose." The aliens did not understand what he meant, but something about the way he said it made them feel cold inside. The voting began soon after. As expected, the council voted to deny humanity's request for help. They gave Robert some polite words about being sorry for human losses, but they would not risk their own people in a war they thought could not be won. As Robert walked out of the Great Hall, he passed by the information displays that showed enemy movements. The aliens had studied these displays many times, looking for weaknesses. They had found none, but Robert saw something they had missed. The enemy always attacked the same way. They always expected their opponents to surrender when things got bad. They had never fought anyone who refused to give up no matter what happened. They had never fought humans. Robert sent a message back to Earth Command as his ship prepared to leave. Request denied as expected. Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was humanity's plan for fighting alone against impossible odds. It was based on a simple idea. If you are going to die anyway, you might as well take as many enemies with you as possible. The aliens in the council thought they had just watched another young race receive its death sentence. What they had actually done was wake up something that had been sleeping in the dark corners of space. For 300 years, humanity's professional army was about to show the galaxy what 30,000 years of continuous warfare had taught them about survival. The enemy would learn too late that there is a big difference between defeating an army and destroying a species that has never learned how to quit. Admiral James stood on the bridge of his warship and watched the enemy fleet approach. His ship was called the Earth's Pride, and it was the biggest ship humanity had ever built. But compared to what was coming toward them, it looked like a small boat facing a tsunami. The space around Miller Station was about to become a battlefield. The station was home to 50,000 humans, including families with children. It was also humanity's most important research facility, where they built new weapons and trained new soldiers. "Sir, we have incoming message from the enemy fleet," said Lieutenant Davis at the communications station. She was young and this was her first real battle, but her voice was steady. "Put it on the main screen," James ordered. The large display showed the face of General Korath, the most feared military leader in known space. His gray skin was covered with ritual scars that told the story of his victories. His black eyes had no emotion in them at all. He had personally overseen the complete destruction of 18 different civilizations. "Human commander," Korath said in a voice like grinding metal. "I am General Korath of the Hegemony Third Fleet. You will immediately surrender your station and all military assets. Your people will be relocated to designated zones where they will serve the Hegemony. Resistance will result in total extermination." James looked at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for his response. These were professional soldiers who had volunteered to defend humanity's farthest outpost. They knew the odds. 3 massive enemy battleships, 15 heavy cruisers, and 40 smaller warships were approaching their position. Against them, humanity had 1 battleship, Miller Station's defenses, and about 12,000 people who refused to run away. "General Korath," James replied calmly, "thank you for your generous offer. Unfortunately, we're going to have to decline." For just a moment, surprise showed on Korath's scarred face. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever refused his surrender demand. Most races started sending surrender signals the moment his fleet appeared on their sensors. "You do not understand your situation, human. My fleet carries 48,000 professional soldiers. My ships have weapons that can crack planets in half. Your small station cannot possibly resist such force." James picked up a data tablet and looked at it like he was reading the weather report. "Actually, General, our intelligence indicates you're carrying exactly 47,200 soldiers across your fleet. Standard hegemony deployment for a Class C pacification operation." Korath's eyes narrowed. How could these primitive humans know classified military information? "What you might not realize," James continued, "is that every person on this station has completed mandatory military service. Our doctors know how to fight. Our engineers know how to make bombs. Our teachers know how to use weapons. Even our children over 12 years old have basic combat training." The enemy general looked confused. Most civilized species kept their military and civilian populations separate. The idea that everyone could be a soldier was foreign to him. "Your threats do not change reality," Korath said. "You have 1 ship and a civilian station. I have an entire battle fleet." "True," James agreed, "but you're making one big mistake in your calculations." "And what is that?" James smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. You're assuming we care about surviving this battle. The transmission ended as James gave orders to his crew. What Korath did not know was that Miller Station had been designed for exactly this situation. Every corridor could become a fortress. Every room could become a weapons factory. Every civilian had been trained to fight to the death. The battle began 30 minutes later when the enemy fleet moved into attack position. The hegemony used their standard tactics. Overwhelming firepower delivered in carefully, planned waves designed to break enemy resistance quickly and with minimal enemy losses, but humans did not respond the way other species did when the station's outer shields failed. Instead of trying to repair them, the humans used the shield generators as massive bombs. When enemy soldiers cut through the hull, they found that the corridors had been filled with deadly traps made from common station equipment. Dr. Williams, the station's head medical officer, led a team of doctors and nurses who had turned the hospital into a fortress. They used surgical tools as weapons and medical supplies to make explosives. When enemy soldiers tried to capture the medical bay, they found themselves fighting people who knew exactly where to cut to cause maximum damage. Engineer Rodriguez shut down life support in sections where enemy soldiers had broken in. Then he turned the air recycling system into a weapon, filling those areas with toxic gases. When the enemy tried to restore the systems, they discovered that the humans had booby-trapped every important control panel. Teacher Martinez organized the civilian families into combat units. Parents fought beside their teenage children, using hunting rifles and improvised weapons. When the enemy reached the school areas, they found that every classroom had been turned into a bunker. The battle that should have lasted 6 hours stretched into 3 days. Korath watched in growing horror as his casualty reports climbed higher and higher. His soldiers were dying in ways that defied all military logic. "Sir," his aide reported with a shaking voice, "the humans are using their own dead as weapons. They're rigging the bodies with explosives and leaving them where our soldiers will find them." "That's impossible," Korath said. "No civilized species would desecrate their own dead." "Sir, I don't think they consider it desecration. I think they consider it practical." On the 4th day, the human resistance finally ended. Korath's forces had captured Miller Station, but the victory felt like defeat. He had lost over 20,000 soldiers taking a single space station. Worse, the humans had destroyed most of the research facilities before they died, denying the hegemony the technology they had come to capture. The final human transmission came from Admiral James, broadcasting from the bridge of his badly damaged ship. "General Korath, congratulations on your victory. You now control a broken station and some very expensive debris. I hope it was worth 20,000 of your soldiers." "Your resistance was pointless," Korath replied angrily. "All you did was delay the inevitable." "Maybe," James said, "but you've just learned something important about humans. We don't fight to achieve military objectives. We fight to make our enemies pay such a high price for victory that they start to question whether conquest is worth the cost." The transmission ended as James's ship exploded, taking the last 300 human defenders with it. But something else died in that explosion. The hegemony's confidence that their conquest of humanity would be quick and easy. News of the Battle of Miller Station spread quickly through both human and enemy territory. Other hegemony commanders began requesting additional troops and supplies for their operations against human targets. The easy war they had expected was becoming something much more dangerous. In his private quarters, General Korath studied the battle reports and tried to understand what he had just experienced. His forces had won, but he felt like he had lost something important. For the first time in his long career, he was beginning to understand the difference between defeating an army and breaking a people's will to fight. Humans, he realized, might not have a breaking point at all. Commander Alex floated in zero gravity inside his small scout ship, staring at the wreckage that used to be the enemy's 5th battle group. Twisted metal and frozen bodies drifted through space like a graveyard of giants. Where there should have been human defeat, there was instead the debris of what had been the galaxy's most feared naval formation. "Computer, run tactical analysis again," Alex said quietly. "Analysis complete," the ship's artificial intelligence replied in its calm voice. "Enemy fleet composition: 3 Dreadnought-class vessels, 12 heavy cruisers, 40 escort ships. Total crew complement, approximately 60,000 personnel. Current status, total destruction achieved." Alex shook his head in amazement. The Battle of Omega Point had lasted only 18 hours, but it had changed everything. A single human fleet had done what the combined forces of 6 alien civilizations had failed to do in 50 years of warfare. His communication system beeped with an incoming message from Galactic Council Command. The face of Supreme Commander Vex appeared on his screen. The four-armed alien looked tired and confused. "Commander Alex," Vex said in his translated voice, "please transmit your full battle report immediately. The Council's military analysts cannot understand the tactical data we are receiving. What specifically do you need clarified, sir?" "Everything," Vex replied, frustration clear in his voice. "Your fleet was outnumbered 3-1. The enemy had superior weapons and armor. According to every military simulation we can run, you should have been completely destroyed within the first 4 hours of combat." Alex nodded. "That's what the enemy thought too, sir. That's why we won." The truth was that humanity had learned something during their expansion into space that other species never needed to learn. When you live on a planet where everything tries to kill you, you develop a very different relationship with death and risk. "Walk me through it step by step," Vex ordered. Alex pulled up the tactical recordings and began his explanation. The enemy fleet approached using standard siege formation. They concentrated their firepower on our command ship, expecting us to withdraw our fleet to protect it. "Standard defensive doctrine," Vex agreed. "Preserve command structure, maintain fleet coordination." Instead, Admiral Blake ordered the command ship to ram the enemy flagship while broadcasting all tactical control to the other vessels. Vex's forearms stopped moving across his control panels. In galactic military history, no commander had ever deliberately sacrificed the command vessel in the opening minutes of a battle. "That's suicide," Vex said quietly. "That's tactics," Alex corrected. "The enemy expected us to fight like civilized beings. They expected us to try to minimize casualties and preserve our command structure. When Admiral Blake rammed their flagship, it destroyed their entire tactical plan in one move." The recording showed the massive human battleship driving straight into the enemy's most powerful vessel. Both ships exploded in a fireball that could be seen from 3 star systems away, but the explosion also took out 2 enemy heavy cruisers and damaged 6 others. After losing their command ship, our remaining vessels split into small groups and attacked from multiple directions. The enemy tried to regroup, but they couldn't coordinate their response fast enough. What Alex didn't mention was the psychological effect of watching humans deliberately sacrifice their most valuable asset. Enemy crews began to panic when they realized they were fighting people who considered their own lives acceptable losses. "Show me the boarding actions," Vex requested, though his voice suggested he was not sure he wanted to see them. The tactical display shifted to show what happened when enemy soldiers tried to capture damaged human ships. Instead of surrendering or evacuating, human crews had turned their own vessels into weapons. "Engineering teams rigged the reactor cores to overload," Alex explained. "Medical staff poisoned the air supply. Even our wounded soldiers were given explosive devices to use when enemy boarders found them." The recordings showed enemy troops entering what they thought were disabled human ships, only to discover that every corridor was a trap and every room was a potential bomb. Human crew members who could no longer fight had volunteered to become living booby traps. "This is not warfare," Vex said, his voice filled with horror. "This is madness. Sir, with respect, this is exactly warfare. Your species and others in the Council fight to achieve political goals. When those goals become impossible, you negotiate terms and try to save lives. There's nothing wrong with that approach." Alex paused the recording and looked directly at the alien commander. "But humans don't fight to achieve political goals. We fight to eliminate threats to our survival. And we've learned that sometimes the only way to eliminate a threat is to make the cost of victory so high that the enemy stops trying to win." The final part of the recording showed the most disturbing scene of all. When the last enemy dreadnought tried to retreat, human fighters had deliberately crashed into its engines. Not because they were out of ammunition or had no other choice, but because ramming attacks were more effective than conventional weapons. "Your casualties were enormous," Vex pointed out. "You lost 60% of your fleet." "Yes, sir. And we considered it a bargain." The communication ended, but Alex knew that Vex and the other council members would spend days trying to understand what they had witnessed. How could a species consider losing most of their military force to be a successful outcome? The answer was simple, but alien minds had trouble grasping it. Humans had evolved on a world where losing 60% of your people in a fight was normal, if it meant the other 40% would survive to reproduce. Natural selection had created a species that was willing to die in large numbers to ensure group survival. More importantly, humans had learned that enemies who expected easy victories became demoralized when victory required massive sacrifices. The hegemony had conquered 47 species, because those species eventually decided that surrender was better than extinction. Humans had made the opposite calculation. They had decided that extinction while fighting was better than slavery after surrender. Alex's orders were to proceed to the next battle zone, where another human fleet was engaged with enemy forces. As his ship turned toward its new destination, he received a priority message from Earth Command. All units, be advised. Enemy forces are beginning to show signs of morale breakdown. Several enemy fleets have requested reinforcements before engaging human targets. Intelligence suggests enemy command is reconsidering their invasion timeline. Alex smiled grimly. The psychological warfare was working. The hegemony was starting to understand that conquering humanity would not be the quick, profitable war they had planned. Every human system they captured would cost them thousands of soldiers. Every human fleet they destroyed would take several of their own fleets with it, but the real lesson was still coming. Everything the enemy had seen so far was just humanity's regular military forces. They had not yet encountered what humans could do when they stopped holding back and started fighting for the survival of their entire species. The wreckage around Omega Point was just the beginning. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had never developed a word for acceptable defeat in any of their languages. Because for humans, there was no such thing. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's 1,000-year history. Representatives from every major civilization sat in shocked silence as the holographic displays showed impossible information. The hegemony empire, which had seemed unstoppable for 5 centuries, was collapsing. High Chancellor Voss stood at the center of the great chamber, his reptilian features showing confusion and fear. In his clawed hands were reports that his military analysts claimed could not be accurate. But the data came from multiple independent sources, including the hegemony's own communication intercepts. In 8 standard months, Voss announced to the assembled delegates, human military forces have achieved what our combined fleets could not accomplish in 50 years of warfare. The hegemony has lost control of 12 major star systems and over 300 colony worlds. Ambassador Robert, the same human who had been dismissed months earlier, stood calmly at his designated speaking position. Behind him, massive displays showed the systematic destruction of enemy forces across 4 galactic sectors. The hegemony's 4th Army attempted to secure the Darwin mining complex. Robert reported with professional detachment. Standard siege doctrine suggested a 6-week campaign with acceptable losses. Human defenders held for 12 days before implementing what our military calls Protocol Zero. The displays shifted to show the aftermath, a dead solar system where humans had turned their own star into a weapon. The resulting explosion had vaporized everything within 2 billion kilometers, including the attacking enemy fleet. That is not military strategy, whispered Ambassador Kess of the peaceful Centaurian Republic, her voice shaking with horror. That is the deliberate destruction of an entire star system. That is resource denial, Robert corrected without emotion. The loss of Darwin forced the hegemony to extend their supply lines through 6 additional systems. Our 7th Fleet was positioned to intercept them. What followed was a detailed explanation of human military philosophy that left the galactic community questioning everything they thought they knew about civilized warfare. While other species fought to minimize casualties and preserve infrastructure, humans fought to eliminate enemies completely, regardless of cost. Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth's chief military strategist, stepped forward to address the growing panic in the chamber. Her quiet voice somehow carried to every corner of the vast room. Honorable delegates, she began, you are trying to understand human warfare through the lens of your own cultural values. You see our tactics as wasteful, our casualties as tragic, our methods as primitive. But you are making a fundamental error in analysis. The displays changed to show Earth's evolutionary history. Millions of years of continuous environmental disasters, ice ages that wiped out most life forms, asteroid impacts that reset civilization, and predators that made survival a daily struggle. You developed civilization on worlds that were relatively safe, Dr. Kim explained. Your species learned to cooperate because cooperation was rewarded with survival. You developed concepts like acceptable, losses, and strategic withdrawal because these concepts helped preserve your people. The chamber remained silent as the implications became clear. Humans developed civilization on a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We learned that cooperation was essential, but we also learned that sometimes you have to be willing to sacrifice everything to protect the group. We never developed concepts like acceptable defeat because defeat meant extinction. High Chancellor Voss interrupted with barely controlled panic in his voice. But surely you cannot sustain such losses indefinitely. Your population, your industrial capacity, your technological development must be suffering enormously. Robert smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Chancellor, that brings us to an important announcement. Earth Command has authorized me to share certain information about humanity's actual military capacity. The displays shifted again, showing data that sent waves of shock through the assembled delegates. Industrial output numbers, population figures, and military production statistics that defied comprehension. The forces currently engaged against the hegemony represent approximately 12% of humanity's total military capacity, Robert stated calmly. Our shipbuilding facilities are currently operating at 30% of maximum output. Our civilian population has not yet been mobilized for wartime production. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of several delegates' translators malfunctioning as they tried to process the implications of what they had just heard. "This is impossible," stammered Counselor Nash, his tree-like form trembling with agitation. "Your species has only been spacefaring for 300 years. You cannot possibly have military resources that exceed civilizations that have existed for millennia." Dr. Kim activated another display showing human colony worlds, hundreds of systems that the Council had not even known were inhabited by humans. While you maintained careful, sustainable population growth on carefully selected worlds, she explained, humans were reproducing as fast as possible on every planet we could reach. We colonized worlds that other species considered uninhabitable. We built cities in environments that would kill most galactic citizens within hours. The display showed human settlements on worlds with toxic atmospheres, crushing gravity, and extreme temperatures. Worlds where simply surviving required technology and determination that most species could not imagine. We did this because Earth taught us a fundamental lesson. The universe is trying to kill you, and your only defense is to spread out so far and reproduce so fast that nothing can destroy all of you at once. Ambassador Kess stood up on shaking legs. "What are you telling us? That everything we have witnessed so far has been restrained?" "The hegemony declared war on humanity with the intention of completely exterminating our species," Robert replied. "What you have witnessed is humanity's measured response to an existential threat. We have been fighting to demonstrate that conquering us would be too expensive to be worthwhile." He paused and looked around the chamber at the terrified faces of beings who were finally beginning to understand what they were dealing with. "However, our latest intelligence suggests that the hegemony leadership is not responding to these lessons appropriately. They appear to be mobilizing additional forces for a final campaign designed to achieve total human extinction. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If the hegemony refused to back down, humanity would stop trying to make conquest expensive and start trying to achieve complete enemy elimination. "What does that mean in practical terms?" asked Voss, though his tone suggested he was afraid of the answer. Dr. Kim's expression became very cold. "It means that humanity will mobilize our full industrial and population capacity for warfare. It means that every human civilian will become a soldier. It means that we will stop trying to preserve enemy infrastructure and start focusing on enemy elimination." She activated one final display showing projections of human military capacity at full mobilization. The numbers were so large that several delegates' translators simply displayed error messages. "We have been trying to end this war with limited resources while maintaining our civilian economy and keeping our population growth stable. If the hegemony forces us to fight for species survival, we will do what Earth taught us to do." "And what is that?" whispered Voss. "We will multiply like a plague, spread across every available world, and consume every resource necessary to ensure that our enemies are completely eliminated." The meeting ended in chaos as delegates rushed to contact their home governments. The galaxy was finally beginning to understand that humanity was not just another spacefaring species seeking its place among the stars. They were apex predators that had accidentally learned to build starships, and if they were pushed too far, they would show the galaxy what 30 million years of survival evolution had taught them about eliminating threats. The surrender ceremony took place aboard the massive human battleship called Victory. Admiral Thomas stood at attention as the former leader of the Hegemony Empire signed the documents that would end 500 years of galactic terror. Supreme Leader Thak's hands shook as he wrote his name, accepting complete and unconditional surrender. 14 months. The mighty Hegemony Empire had fallen to humanity in 14 months. Representatives from every major galactic power watched the ceremony in stunned silence. These were the same beings who had refused to help humanity when the war began. Now they scrambled to establish friendly relations with what they finally understood to be the galaxy's new dominant military force. Chancellor Voss of the Saurian Empire approached Admiral Thomas with careful, respectful movements. The tall reptilian leader's previous arrogance had been replaced by the cautious behavior of someone who finally understood they were in the presence of apex predators. "Admiral," Voss said formally, "the Saurian Empire wishes to propose a mutual defense agreement with the human government." Thomas nodded politely. "We appreciate the offer, Chancellor. We will consider it after our territorial consolidation is complete." The phrase territorial consolidation sent nervous energy through the assembled diplomats. It was humanity's diplomatic way of describing what other species would call conquest and occupation. Dr. Williams, Earth's senior diplomatic representative, stepped forward to address the gathering. Her words carried the weight of official human policy and would determine the future of galactic politics. "The human species formally recognizes all legitimate governments represented here today," she announced clearly. "We seek peaceful relations with all civilized worlds and pledge to honor existing treaties and territorial agreements." Relieved whispers echoed through the room, but Dr. Williams continued speaking. "However, we also formally announced the establishment of the Human Defense Zone, encompassing all former hegemony territories and selected strategic systems. Any military action against human interests within this zone will be considered an act of war against humanity." She activated a holographic display showing the new political map of known space. The Human Defense Zone covered nearly 2,000 star systems, making humanity the largest single political entity in galactic history. "This is unprecedented," protested Ambassador Cole of the Democratic Federation. "No single species has ever claimed such extensive territory. No single species has ever been forced to completely eliminate another spacefaring civilization for their own survival." Thomas replied matter-of-factly. "The hegemony chose to wage a war of extermination against humanity. We simply completed what they started." As the ceremony concluded and representatives began leaving, quiet conversations revealed the new reality. Humanity had not just won a war, they had redefined what galactic warfare meant. Their willingness to accept massive casualties, their refusal to consider surrender, and their systematic approach to enemy elimination had created a new standard for military effectiveness. What troubled the galactic community even more was the growing realization that humanity had been showing restraint during the war. Their full military potential, their complete industrial capacity, their entire population had never been mobilized for the conflict. In his private office aboard the Victory, Admiral Thomas reviewed reports from Earth Command. The news was both encouraging and terrifying. Military expansion was proceeding faster than anyone had thought possible. New technologies were being developed at an incredible rate. Colony ships were already establishing human settlements in former enemy territory. General Patricia entered the office carrying classified briefings from multiple human fleets. Her expression was serious as she handed over the documents. "Admiral, we have confirmation that several alien governments are quietly building up their military forces. They appear to be preparing for the possibility of future conflict with humanity." Thomas was not surprised. Expected behavior. They have just watched us eliminate their greatest military threat. They are naturally concerned about our intentions. Should we be worried about a coalition forming against us? Thomas considered the question while reviewing intelligence reports about alien military activities. Several species were indeed increasing their military spending and forming new alliance agreements. "General, let me ask you a question," Thomas said finally. "During the war with the hegemony, what percentage of our military capacity did we actually utilize?" Patricia checked her data pad. "Approximately 15% of our total military capacity. We never mobilized our civilian population, never converted our full industrial capacity to wartime production, and never deployed our planetary defense forces. And our current military expansion? We are adding new ships and training new personnel at a rate that will double our current military capacity within 2 years. But this is still considered peaceful expansion compared to what we could achieve under full wartime mobilization." Thomas nodded and activated his communication system to contact Earth Command. The face of Fleet Admiral Johnson appeared on his screen, calling from the Center of Human Military Command. "Admiral Thomas," Johnson said without preliminary greetings, "what is your assessment of potential future threats to human security?" "Sir, multiple alien governments are showing signs of military buildup. Intelligence suggests they are concerned about human expansion and are preparing defensive measures. Some may be considering preemptive action. Recommendations?" Thomas had been expecting this question and had already prepared his response. "Sir, I recommend immediate implementation of the expansion protocol. We should establish human settlements and military bases throughout our claimed territory before anyone decides to challenge our boundaries." "Approved. What about the possibility of alien military action against our expansion?" "Sir, I believe we should make our position very clear. Any attempt to militarily oppose human territorial claims should be met with the same response we gave to the hegemony." The communication ended, but both officers understood what had just been decided. Humanity would continue expanding its territory and military capacity. Any species that attempted to stop this expansion would be treated as an existential threat to human survival. 3 weeks later, human colony ships arrived at strategic locations throughout the former hegemony territory. Each colony ship was accompanied by a full military escort and carried enough supplies and personnel to establish a permanent human presence. The message to the galactic community was clear. Humanity was not just occupying former enemy territory temporarily. They were establishing permanent settlements defended by military forces that had just proven their effectiveness against the galaxy's former dominant power. Several alien governments sent diplomatic protests, claiming that human expansion violated various galactic treaties and customs. The human response was polite but firm. Humanity had not signed those treaties, and human survival took priority over alien customs. When the Centaurian Republic attempted to send warships to monitor human expansion activities, they received a simple message from Admiral Thomas. Any military vessels approaching human territory will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. The Centaurian ships withdrew immediately. In the months that followed, the galaxy adjusted to its new reality. Humanity controlled nearly a quarter of all known inhabited space and showed no signs of slowing their expansion. Their military forces continued to grow larger and more sophisticated. Their technology continued to advance at a pace that other species found difficult to match. Most importantly, every species in the galaxy now understood that humans fought wars differently than anyone else. They did not fight to achieve political objectives that could be negotiated. They fought to eliminate threats to their survival, completely and permanently. The moment the galaxy realized humanity's professional army was unstoppable was not when they won their first battle, or when they destroyed the hegemony's main fleet, or even when they accepted the enemy's surrender. It was when they understood that everything they had witnessed had been accomplished by a species that was still holding back, still showing restraint, still trying to be civilized neighbors. The galaxy's professional armies would spend the next century studying human tactics, trying to understand how to fight against an enemy that considered total victory the only acceptable outcome. But the most important lesson was simple. Never threaten the survival of a species that has spent millions of years learning how to survive impossible odds, because they will show you exactly what impossible really means.